And now, what are the most correctable issues then, Seth?
Look, the penalties theoretically should be correctable, but they're going 3 weeks with 11-plus penalties. The average in an NFL game is 6. The Texans are doubling the average penalties of just about every week. Maybe I'm a beaten man, but I was happy that some of the offensive line penalties were at least aggressive offensive line penalties as opposed to illegal formation and not as many false starts. But I think it speaks to a larger problem of simply attention to detail. And it's most notable and trackable when you look at penalty numbers, but the mental errors, the missed assignments on both offense and defense, it's a team that's just not dialed in the way they need to be if they really want to realize their full potential, because they're not playing up to their potential right now, and that's why even a win can feel so frustrating.
What's correctable? Paying attention, just like Seth said. I mean, these are just lapses in judgment, essentially, a lot of these penalties when you talk about whether it's legal formation or whether you're talking about false starts. These are lapses in judgment and not paying attention. And that's always correctable.
Well, let me be devil's advocate. They had a week to correct these, and they still, now yes, they were better on some pre-snap penalties, but when you look at the big picture, they still had double-digit penalties. So how, if it's the most correctable thing, then why couldn't they correct it in 1 week?
Right, it's a very, very good question. I think it's one that football coaches and coaches of every sport ask themselves, and it's frustrating when your team isn't following through on this. At some point, I think the leadership does have to come from the players. I do think also, and I wonder, sometimes, especially on offense, when a coordinator strives for complexity, and we heard the Texans talk a lot during training camp about how they were going to be able to be at a higher level this year because they already had the basics down, sometimes you're cruelly reminded that you have to go back to basics. Always, always, always. And right now, they can't do some of the basic things like run blocking efficiently and well. And they probably think they've gone back to basics, but they got to keep drilling the basics and make the game a little bit simpler, perhaps.
Has this affected your perception of this team's ceiling? Because when I look at this football team, to me, the best thing right now about the Texans is the fact that they still have a lot of upside, and the fact that they haven't played well. They've committed a lot of penalties. They haven't had a run game, and yet they're still winning games. What we've seen through these first 4 games, does it affect how you look at the overall ceiling of what this team can become?
Yeah, I think actually it's funny. I think it's kind of an inverse relationship. I actually think that the worse they play and still win, the higher their ceiling is, because we haven't seen them put together even probably half of a complete game yet.
That's true. You know, it's like when you've got kids and one of them's an A student and one of them is definitely a C student. And, you know, the C student gets a C plus and you think like, hey, good for you. But when your A student gets a B, the poor kid, you're going to be tough on him because he's capable of more. And right now, the Texans, I feel like they're playing like a B or a C student when you know they're capable of being an A student. That's what's so frustrating. But you're right. They're beating mediocre or bad teams with really bad performances. But we just had a reminder last week of, okay, this is what happens when you play a good opponent. And the Bills, unless something crazy happens on Sunday Night Football, they're a good football team.
They are a good football team, which makes me wonder if they will play up to the competition, because sometimes when you have these teams that are inconsistent, they play down to their competition. Is it possible that when Buffalo rolls in here with one of the best quarterbacks in the league in Josh Allen and a team that destroyed the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that you took down to the very bitter end of a game, that maybe the Texans will get their acts together and they will play much better than they've been playing?
I think one of the things right now with the Texans where they seem very much in a developmental stage, and maybe we should have realized that, yeah, this was going to be a team that's in the developmental stage. You have to look at the young guys like Kenyon Green and Juice Scruggs. On defense, you look at Kamari Lassiter, and he's done some really good things. He has a few rookie moments here and there. These guys can get better. I've seen this time and time again in the NFL. Guys can improve during the season. So some of it is on them. And really, like on the offensive line, it's on the veteran leadership. One of the reasons I get frustrated with Laramie Tunsil isn't because I hate Laramie Tunsil or something. It's that I know that Laramie Tunsil is capable of being an even better football player than he already is. And when the alpha dog on the team isn't paying attention to detail, isn't doing the little things right, the younger guys notice. I think the biggest X factor that I think I'm almost in denial about it because I don't want it to be such a big deal, but a running back in the modern NFL Joe Mixon's just a different dude. He's just a different guy. A lot of the issues on the offensive line need to be fixed, but Joe Mixon makes it look a lot better. That's like when your C student comes home with a really good-looking girlfriend. Like, oh, all right, this kid's got something to him. He knows he can do some things.
Yeah, I think that they are going to be up for this game on Sunday versus Buffalo. But I do agree with you. They've played down to their competition, and I think that's kind of the sign of a team that's not fully mature. They don't realize yet that every single week is going to be somebody who sees them now as the hunted.
But it's a veteran team, though.
Yeah, they've got a lot of old guys. You're right. No, you're exactly right. They do. They should theoretically have veteran leadership. I think the best leader by example right now on the team is probably, other than CJ, is Nico Collins. I mean, Nico he produces. He got paid what looked like a really good deal for him. By the end of the season, if he keeps playing this way, he's underpaid. But you know what? I don't expect Nico to be agitated about it. He just wants to go out and play football. I mean, Nico is everything you want in a football player. If you could get guys playing up to his level of professionalism and his performance, if you could get even 10% of that, the Texans would be in a much better place.
So if I had to say, Seth, if I have to rip off that Band-Aid, or you give me a score, what would you pick for a score for this coming week against the Buffalo Bills?
Today I predicted the Texans would win 49-3. I can't do that. Honestly.
Against Jacksonville.
Yes. Against Jacksonville. With the Bills, right now, I'd have to pick them as a 7-point underdog at home. No, I'd put them as a 5-point underdog at home, but it's a tough one.
You, Zach, how do you feel?
I think it's going to be a lower scoring game than people think. I don't think this is going to be a shootout by any means. Texans defense has been the thing that has been there for them all season. More consistent, I would say, overall than the offense, or at least made bigger plays. And so I really think it's going to be a lower score, maybe like 24-17, something like that.
Texans had only one sack of Trevor Lawrence. From a defensive perspective, certainly they left some meat on the bone, but overall, and they also allowed almost 7 yards per carry.
Yeah.
Overall, is that even more disappointing, what we saw defensively?
Yeah, I think the run defense and where they are right now, and again, some of that goes back to the personnel they have on the field. They play with a lot of defensive backs on the field. They're just literally lighter in the pants than some defenses. Christian Harris's return, hopefully. We don't really have any information about him. Danico Autry coming back. I'm not optimistic that Christian Harris will play next week. Maybe he will. Danico Autry won't be eligible for another couple weeks. That should help.
He is Seth Payne, the former Texan from Sports Radio 610. Seth, as always, we appreciate you coming in and breaking it all down here on Sports Extra.
I appreciate you supporting me during my convalescence.
Yeah, sorry to see that.